Hi, YouTube. I'm JD. Been playing D&D and other tabletop RPGs, Starfinder, Star Wars, custom homebrew stuff. Made my own whole rule set once for a campaign, which actually went pretty well. This over here, I believe,
Other
is
side.
over there is Chombo, a good buddy of mine. We've been doing D&D together now for quite a while. He is actually still relatively new to D&D. Only play
I've been playing. I played my first session probably when I was a freshman in high school. Um, like true D&D. Me and a very dear friend of mine used it basically as kind of like just a form of escape. Like we grew up in kind of like a bad neighborhood and stuff like that. What was hard, and it was more or less a tool for us to kind of just forget about all the bad stuff that was going on. But yeah, I've been playing steady at this point for probably about a year ish, and have maybe two campaigns under my belt that I haven't died in, which is cool.
I have lost track of how many campaigns I have under my belt at this point. I've lost track of how many games I've DM'd at this point, and for the first 4 or 5 years, I didn't DM at all. So, yeah, I've been playing a while. So what we're doing is we're going to talk everything about D&D. I've been seeing a lot of stuff about, hey, I really want to get into D&D. Where do I start? What should I do first? This video will be the intro to that. Following videos will cover everything from races to classes to backgrounds to feats to spells to just monsters, how to DM, everything D&D at some point.
What's going to be kind of unique about us is this is going to be a perspective from two players, one that's never DM'd, one that's a seasoned DM, and just overall difference in scale as far as the length we've been playing. With him playing for much longer than I have and DMing, well, exponentially compared to the lack that I have even touched. I feel like this is going to be a really interesting perspective. And if anybody has any questions, please, please, please leave them in the comments below or find us on the socials, which we will also be adding.
Below as well in the description. When you got into D&D, actually got into D&D, not your kid, you're just making up your own rules. You kind of have a rule book, maybe not, but you're doing the D&D thing, you're learning. You're having fun with it as a kid. What made you want to come back to it? What made you want to get into D&D heavy?
Oh man, kind of like what I said a little bit before. It was kind of like a means of escape to an extent. Being able to, and I've said this a bunch of times, and I use this description every time somebody asks me why I play. Being able to be someone that you're not, get rid of the flaws that you feel you may personally have as your own persona, as you as a person, is really really neat. You can take somebody that is very kind of shy and withdrawn and doesn't really like going outside for whatever reason, and pretend to be this awesome epic adventurer that is not afraid of danger, that is willing to get in somebody's face and just kind of just like let them have it. Being able to be someone that you are not is what brought me back and keeps bringing me back.
It's awesome. For myself, early college, second year of college is when I really got into it. So my first D&D experience was my first year of college with some people that I was going to church with at the time. We're hanging out at their house, and they were like, "Hey, let's do some D&D." And they had D&D Modern, and this was 3.5 Modern Edition or Modern rule set, which was just insane and completely weird and very Shadowrun for anybody who might be familiar with that. It was okay. My girlfriend at the time did some stuff that was very unexpected for this being kind of a church group doing this, and very just kind of on the nose and like, hey, this is all make believe and we're just having fun. And it's just make believe as adults. We can do whatever we want. This is awesome. Um, then it was about another year, came back to it, had some work friends invite me over and say, hey, we're going to do D&D. You should come by. Made characters, played for a few weeks, and then that was my usual group whenever they would kick it up, and I just never got out of it.
What's really funny too, like I didn't mention it, but I mean I didn't think about it, but my first like group of D&D friends were my church buddies. They like we would play in our youth group room. That is God's honest truth.
So for everybody I've seen asking how to get started, let's go over that. How would you get started if you were starting today? No knowledge of it besides I've seen some YouTube videos, I've watched some Twitch, I've seen some people playing D&D, I've heard of D&D, it sounds amazing. Where do I start?
I mean, you kind of answered part of the question as far as I would say, and kind of like how I've even helped kind of some of the newer players that are in our current party
Mhm,
in the Valorant campaign, which you can
mhm.
catch on twitch.tv/dungeons and dopes on Fridays or Saturdays at 4 o'clock. uh, Absorb content. I'm gonna shout out some YouTubers that have been helpful to me. Dungeon Dudes, XP to level 3, Taking 20, and WebDM.
There you go.
Words are hard.
Sometimes.
But aside from just absorbing content, just like off of YouTube and through Twitch streams and stuff like that, there's a lot of free stuff you can kind of pick up on the web itself. Um, Before I started playing my first campaign, when Shady was doing like a legit D&D campaign,
Mhm.
about 2 years ago, I lived on Roll20's wiki. Um, it basically has like a top to bottom essential like virtual kind of like PHB, spell list, you name it. This is kind of before like D&D Beyond became a thing, which now you can hop on and they've got a lot of free tool sets for character creation and stuff like that. And honestly, reaching out to some of my friends that have been playing and have a little bit more experience than I do, and then moving to the character building itself, which is the fun part.
It is the fun part, and I would agree with that. D&D Beyond has a lot of great places to start. Most of the SRD information, that the free rules that you can find for D&D Fifth Edition, is on D&D Beyond, which helps and makes it a little bit easier to build characters and look at some of the rules and things like that. Roll20, completely free site, um, for what it is, and it being completely free is amazing. Has a lot of the rules, has a lot of the spells, has a lot of the information that you need just on there. Um, the As far as other resources, I'm going to mention one YouTuber that you didn't. Matt Colville
Oh
is
yeah, you sent me his link, man. He does have good stuff. That's true.
he is an amazing DM. Very real, low fantasy kind of games, but he's amazing DM. A lot of his ideas are stuff that I've started using myself. Everybody else you've mentioned, I've watched myself as well. If you ever get to the point to where you've looked at the free stuff, you've taken in the content, you're ready to take the plunge in, even if you're not playing yet, and say, "Hey, this is something that's going to be my hobby. This is something I want to do." A 7 die set. It's a D4, a D6, a D8, a D10, a D percentile, which is another D10, but it's the 10 spot. It's for rolling D100s. A D12 and a D20. They run. Last I bought one, they were running $10 to $15 at any given time. And then also Player's Handbook. It has 90% of the player information that you will ever need in it. I don't ask players to buy it. I suggest that if you do start playing and you become a regular in a campaign, you buy it, because 90% of anything you will do is in the handbook somewhere. Same way for a dungeon master. You should have the DMG, or you should have the DMG of whatever rule set you're running, just because there's so much good information for that rule set in it.
I definitely agree. And speaking to that directly, having been somewhere that used strict like digital versions of the PHP and all this other stuff, the way it's formatted to me gets a little wonky sometimes because searching through things can be a little bit more difficult. And there's something about just having like a physical item for me personally that says, "Hey, I'm physically supporting and I'm a part of something that I care about." And I think contributing to that financially, honestly, to a certain point, at least for me, shows my support to, the artists and everybody that's even taken part in it.
I've have most of the PDFs as well, but I can tell you just from my for myself and for a lot of people I know, having the physical book is so much easier to find something in than anything else, because you can put tabs in it. You can put a piece of paper in it if you really want to find something quick, and just boop, there it is, as opposed to being like, okay, I think this, writing down the page number and then having to click and search through to that
Mm-hmm.
page and find the right spot. It's just, You flip to the page, you're there. It saves so much time in just small increments.
Even Sarah and Andy, another two players in our party that were strict digital, they were like on the exact same page from what you and I are talking about right now, and they got themselves each PHPs too. So I mean, it's definitely worth it. Don't be alarmed when you see the price tag on the back, because a lot of times you can find it way cheaper. You can even find them used.
So let me ask you, we're talking about people getting into it. We have some rules, we have some stuff to look at. People are going to want to know where to start. What class is good for beginners? So I'm going to break it down. What if somebody's wanting to do a sword and shield, a couple swords, a big axe, a melee character? What class?
All right, so I'm gonna answer this on two scales. If we want to make just realistically, in my opinion, and I did this, just a badass frontline fighter, um, I would honestly say I would start with Monk. That's my honest opinion. Maybe even more specifically, probably Way of the Open Hand. It's pretty straightforward, and it's in my opinion one of the easiest classes to kind of get the hang of, because that class directly an overall monk, unless you choose like the Way of the Four Elements, you don't really have any spells that you have to worry about. You're basically just kind of focusing on, all right, what's my monk attack die, or my martial die, excuse me, and how many attacks do I get, and whether or not I stun this sumbitch or not.
Pretty much. Monks are not in a great place in fifth edition, which we've talked about at length before and tried to
Hmm.
tinker with it and fix it. But for somebody starting out, you start anywhere between level 1 and level 5. You play a couple games. Your first campaign goes up till say level 8. Monks are going to be great for the whole time. Past level 8, once you start getting into the mid game, and then even at the late game, monks become a one trick pony where it's, hey, I walk up, I stun it. Does it stun? No. I stun it. Does it stun? No. And you do that a handful of times, and that's your turn.
Yeah.
Early on, though, you're running around the battlefield. You're knocking out 2, 3, 4 people each turn. You're stunning big things when you need to. Like,
Hmm.
monks are very versatile early on. They're really good.
I also like that you kind of get to live out that kind of like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon fantasy behind it, which is really cool. And one thing that monks get to do, which is really, really rad, aside from Stunning Strike, which in my opinion, like you said, is pretty much their bread and butter, is you can literally catch objects that are thrown at you. Like this includes like bullets, arrows, and kind of throw them back, which is super rad. But again, like in my personal experience, although it's kind of easy to get the hang of and stuff, we were playing a campaign to once I got to like level 6, I felt like I was kind of pulled back in the party and I wasn't able to do as much. So much in fact that the current DM's like, I'm kind of starting to notice that too. So one thing that we did that you can try doing too, it's up to you. We increased the monk martial arts dice by basically
Just a little.
by just a hair. So it went from being like a D6 to like a D8, which, oh my god, it sounds big, but in reality, it's only a 2 damage differential if you can even roll that high.
That would be up to the DM too. I mean,
Exactly.
that's something you have to talk with your DM about. Most DMs who have been playing fifth edition for a while or have any experience with fifth edition that have had a monk go beyond eighth, ninth level understand completely that of the time, unless they've rolled god stats and you've given them so many magic items and everything, monks are pretty. They're starting to fall off around there. Um, Myself, if I had a new person come in and be like, "Hey, I don't know what I want to do. Where do I start? I want to be a melee dude." You're gonna be a barbarian. You're gonna be a berserker barbarian.
That was legit going to be my second one, man.
You're going to put your highest rolled stat in Constitution, your second highest in Strength or Dex. You're set. Have fun. Go hit stuff. And when you get in trouble, rage.
Rage. Yep.
If you want to start picking up some magic stuff later, I'll throw you an item and let you slowly learn. But just from learning, by all means, play a barbarian, be a wild man, get into it, just go berserk, and it's just a fun way to cut loose. Now, I will say that does cause a few problems with what most people would call a murder hobo, but
Hey
doesn't
JD,
have
what's a
to.
murder hobo?
Murder hobos are people who walk around and just kill everything on sight. Oh, a villager, they kinda pissed me off a little bit, or they walked in front of me instead of around me, and I didn't really want I'm just gonna kill them,
That poor civilian villager with 1 HP just got cleaved in half by your barbarian's battle axe. I hope you're happy.
right? And that everybody's a murder hobo at some point.
Oh,
I was a
100%.
murder hobo at one point.
Yeah.
There are some campaigns where the whole campaign, you are a bunch of murder hobos, and it's great. For a lot of campaigns, though, murder hobo is mostly frowned upon
I agree.
because maybe the villager had information. The villager has a family somewhere, we hope. Even if he's the town drunk, everybody knows him as the town drunk. Now he's missing and dead, and that's on you. So, murder hobo carefully.
Well said.
Okay, so we have the melee. What about the person who's I don't wanna play the melee. I wanna cast spells. That's the only reason I wanna play. I wanna cast spells. Where do you send them?
Um, I would say if they just kind of want to dip their toes in a little bit of magic, and for a new player that also is going to have the ability to be a little on the melee side. Like I'm torn between two, and I'll start with the one that I would kind of think would be cool. Like I think Warlock to an extent is a little more simpler depending on what subclass you're gonna go with.
I'm gonna counter you there. I'm gonna tell you to go to the second one. I'll tell you why.
Okay.
A
Oh,
warlock a warlock for a new player that was wanting to play spells. How many spells do you have as a warlock?
not many.
You get like 2 spell casts per rest.
Right.
With a wizard at the same level, you're getting like 5, 6.
True. The
So you're
reason I
getting more
was
of that
yeah,
spell.
the
Yeah.
reason I was saying Warlock though is because of its limitations, but also because of the ability to cast those spells later on at like maximum, max power, which is really really cool.
That is cool.
And my other option is actually going to be, and it's going to sound weird, it's going to be out of left field, but I'm actually going to say an Arcane Trickster Rogue.
Okay, so gotta get to level 3. Level 3, you get half spells.
Hmm.
You end up with a few more than warlock, but has to be
And the spells
most.
are on the lower
Okay.
side of things, and you can use a lot of them for utility, which is nice.
Yeah.
You can use Tasha's Hideous Laughter if you want to get on more on the offensive side of things. But I feel moving into like the sorcerer or wizard realm is going to be a little overwhelming for a new player.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you there now. Like, I was just gonna say wizard or druid. You don't have to get into the whole wild shape thing much with druid unless you just really want to. Most whenever I've done it before in the past, it's I use wild shape as either a get out of jail free
Hmm.
or I'm in trouble. I need some more HP. I'm gonna wild shape real quick and run.
Counter. What about a cleric?
I like clerics. Clerics would be my. I was on the fence between cleric and druid. I couldn't decide. Wizard for sure. If all you want to do is cast spells and throw spells all day, wizard. You have a ton of spell slots. You have a ton of spell options. The only difficult part of a wizard is you're
Staying
picking.
alive.
Well, staying alive, stay in the back, and hope
Yeah.
that your enemies are not intelligent. Um, Picking your spells because you have such a massive spell list. Um, I like clerics. Clerics used to until I played a druid. Clerics were my favorite class. They are in fifth edition. Clerics are, in my opinion, the strongest thing in the game.
Druids are super dope in the fact that if you do it right and you build stuff right, being able to take advantage of your wild shape is almost a shield or second pool of HP in and of itself is
Yeah,
super super rad. And pairing that with something like Sentinel Feet or something like that, like all right, I wild shape into giant bear. All right, you've got 100 and whatever hit points. All right, cool. So I just lost 107 hit points. Great, now I'm back to a druid.
they have their class. They have their options to where to start. Everybody has a race idea. Does the race impact the character beyond aesthetic? In your experience,
In my experience, and I can't really touch too much on 3.5 because I only played a few games of that. But in 5th edition, it is, in my experience, and I'm willing to let anybody say, hey, I disagree, because that's what we're here for. We're here to have a conversation. I personally feel we as players are choosing races that will benefit our class. For example, you if you're choosing a character that you're like, well, I want to be let's go back to monk for example. I want to play a monk. All right, so I want to be a dex fighter. I want to find a race that's going to give me something plus whatever to my dex and plus whatever to whatever stat that I feel like I want to focus on. Um
Let me let me ask, do you feel like a player is doing themselves a disservice if they pick an off race?
I don't feel like they're doing themselves a disservice per se. They might be making things a little bit more challenging for themselves because those little bonus one modifiers and all that extra stuff that can kind of come in line with what you're trying to do depending on your race. Like every time I've played a monk and I think they're good, like going with either human variant is always a good because having those feats right off the bat is super good. Or an elf, man, because getting the bonus to the dexterity it's good. That +2 helps those rolls out. I'm
Yep.
not saying that that's the way it has to be, but that's the way I've always played because I want to min max would be the term that I'd use the best I can.
I'll agree with that to a point. I feel like fifth edition has the most lax version of that. I feel like in fifth edition, if you take a race that has no strength bonus and you want to make a barbarian that's pure strength, cool, great. Take your highest roll. You'll be fine. Um, and the reason I say that is personally, my highest stat that I always do, Constitution, because I always want more HP.
Oh
It is
yeah,
the
for sure.
most. It is for me and the way I run my games and the games that I've been a part of. It is the most important stat out of any of them. So races aren't as impactful as they used to be. Used to be a lot of your feats, a lot of your training that was harder to get, a lot of your spells, a lot of your just a lot of almost everything used to be tied to race more than it is now. Now in fifth edition, it's kind of like Paladin. They've taken out all the stuff that limits people from playing Paladin, and now you can play a Paladin and not have to be lawful good all the time.
Mhm.
It's it just opens it up more. So play the race you want, but also look at the bonuses and think about whether or not that +1 bonus to everything you do that your character wants to do is worth it.
Agreed.
Backgrounds. Making a character a background. A lot of people have an idea for a character. They want the blind monk or they want the blind swordsman. Where do backgrounds come in on that? Because backgrounds in fifth edition, you get extra spells or extra
Mhm.
skills, extra languages, extra gear, all kinds of stuff. And it also helps because you get the personality traits and the ideals and stuff that it kind of gives you not an you have to stick to this, but more of an idea of, hey, this is kind of an ideal that a soldier would have or that a street urchin would have from the way that they grew up. Do you pick one and just go with that one? Do you kind of take the background that you've made in your head and kind of find one that kind of fits it a little bit? I know we homebrew a lot, so that changes things. But as far as we're not doing homebrew, we're having to use what's in the book. Rules is written. How are you going to do that?
Again, for me being the player and depending on what I'm doing, like I would pretty much kind of do the same thing that I would do like if I'm picking my race. I'm going to pick a background that's going to help buffer what I already want my character to do and be able to make them better. A lot of people, for example, to take rogues always take a criminal background because it's going to benefit them. They're going to have it also fits with their character, being that shady, sneaky quasi thief or maybe reformed criminal or something like that. Um, but you can also go the opposite way and pick a background that has nothing to do. I want to be a gnome barbarian that is a withdrawn, hidden away from society, recluse type person, which would be like, oh, wait, how'd that happen? Take the background, build on it, make it make sense. And then you've taken something that's just written in a book, you've
Mhm.
taken the overall idea, which fits for Raw, and tweaked it a little bit for yourself to make the character yours.
Absolutely. That's the way I always do it. Whenever I make a character, I get my race, I get my class, I get all that figured out. I kind of start building a backstory in my head for this character that they grew up in this place and their mom and dad may or may not still be alive, and they have a whole story in my head. And then I start looking through the backgrounds and until I find something that fits. But yeah, I never really pick a background that fits my character. I'm always just whatever the story for my character and how they went into adventuring is, that's the background. But
And if
that's
you
me.
yeah,
That's me.
yeah, and if you want to pick just a generic background, by all means, do it. There's nothing wrong with that. As time goes on, though, I feel the character as a whole means more to me personally as a player when I've had the opportunity to kind of craft this whole story about the character that I'm creating.
What happened before your character picked up a sword and shield or a staff and said, I'm going to go make things better, or I'm going to go and fix this?
Mhm.
It's the past. It has nothing to do with now, which is why it's entirely up to you to for whatever it is. It's entirely up to the story of that character.
I
Do you-
think too that the like having a really cool background as well also gives your character and your players something to strive for, something to maybe become or overcome, or even maybe even just forget about.
it,
And
it
go ahead.
it's part of the multiple people storytelling, the communal storytelling of D&D. It's some DMs never do it. Some DMs are, I have a storyline and we're going to play adventures and we're going to run the storyline and your background's not really going to come up, and that's really sad. And but sometimes that's okay. Sometimes you just don't want to have to think about that stuff. You want to say, hey, these are my stats. These are what I get from my background. Let's just go kill stuff. Give me a storyline. I don't care about my background. I don't care about my character's story that much. But I can tell you from experience, when you do, and when you have a DM that'll dig into it,
It's
it,
fucking
get,
awesome.
it gets real. It gets
Yeah,
so real.
it's so
Um,
rad.
you can get so separated and displaced from your own self that you are 100% your character in your brain for a while you're playing. And then whenever you leave that night, it's like, oh my gosh, oh, what am I going to do?
Right,
And it
and
changes
that
everything.
and that's when you're like, "Oh man, I am completely enthralled and infatuated with not just this character at this point in this world." When you have taken yourself, you've taken JD, you've taken Ryan out and you're like, "Wow, I, now thinking as Hutch, can't believe that I, Hutch, just did that.
Exactly.
Why did I do that?" And you're just like, "Wait." And then, you're talking about D&D all the time, and then your girlfriend's like, "Will you just stop talking about it? Because I don't know what the hell's going on." And then you're like, "Well, hey, do you want to play?" And then they're like, "I tried it, it's not my jam." That's okay too.
When it goes from, well, my character is having problems with this. Well, my character, this person I've made would do the to no, my character's name, I Hutch, I whomever am going to do this. I can't let this stand. I have to stop this. And anything like that. That's whenever it gets real.
And there's a word that that you hear often used for such that. You know what you call that, my friends? You call that role playing.
With an upper R, capital R.
Yeah.
It's the king's role play.
Yeah, and that's when D&D I think really starts to shine, and that's when the game kind of like starts to come alive and you really start to experience it for what it is, which is a mutual storytelling in my opinion between a DM and the players.
Everybody crafting a world and everybody crafting a story that's compelling and that can pull and dig into who you are and dig into different aspects and problems that everybody has in the real world and make it palatable and something that can be overcome and handled and make you feel better about everything at the end of the day. Even though sometimes the end of the day is very hard.
Yeah. Yeah, and it
But
can be. And sometimes we end a session, sometimes it can make that day even harder.
yeah, but that's not a bad thing. That I don't think that's ever a bad thing. Introspection is good, and this is a safe, when done correctly, a safe and comfortable place to do that.
I agree. One thing I would kind of like to add before we wrap up here is if you ever get to a point in a session where you as a player come across something that is um not does not feel right to you on a personal and moral level or ethical level or anything like that that you're just not comfortable with, speak up about it. Tell your party members that, hey, I am not okay with this scenario happening right now. I am not comfortable with it on a personal level. This is Ryan speaking. This is JD speaking. Can we not do this? Speak up about it. That's okay.
Mhm.
And personally, I feel if you are a part of a team that's like, well, that doesn't matter, you're probably with the wrong party, because nobody should go out
Absolutely.
of their way to make anybody feel uncomfortable, unwanted, or anything like that when you're playing a game that's supposed to have fun. The minute the fun's taken away, it's no longer a game, in my opinion.
And with that, I think we're going to wrap this one up. I've been JD. This is Jumbo. This is Ryan.
It's been a pleasure, everybody. Thank you so much. You again follow our socials. We stream again on Twitch, either on Fridays or Saturdays, depending on when our good buddy Andy is available to play. But follow us on there if you'd like to. Put the notifications on, ring the bell, and all that jazz if that's what you want to do. We appreciate you spending some time with us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye bye.